Hello, this is Slightly Mad Angus. This is my little 150 gram robot. It's a bit hard to describe what sort of robot it is because I have not seen any other robots with this style of weapon on it. I have been told that there is an American robot that might have something similar on it, but I have not been able to see anything like it. So to me, I've come up with a unique weapon idea. Now, what this is, I call it a rotary flipper. Miles at the Ipswich Robotic Sports Club calls it a tumbler. I prefer a rotary flipper because it's more technical, the way the sound is. But basically, it's got this little claw arm on the front, which acts as a wedge, so get the other robots in here, and then we turn it on and it rotates around. And the way it's set up is it's got these gears on the front that go back to a motor, similar to the drive motors. So basically it can rotate forever in either direction. Now I have different types of jaws in the front. So this one's got little serration edges on it to try to grab hold of the edges of the other robots while it's twisting. I have a longer claw here to try to reach further over the robots and hopefully grab that better. And I also have a wide flat claw, which I was hoping could twist them a little bit easier. Now I have no idea which one's better. Basically, I just have fun designing claws, and when I test them in combat they all seem to act the same. So yeah, it's a good fun robot because it lets me try out different things and I can switch things over pretty quick. Now at the last competition it actually has been competing rather well, so it got third at the last competition, and even though it's kind of a weird design, it does pretty well and it's very entertaining to watch, particularly when it grabs hold of another robot and twists it around, and sometimes twists itself over. But it has had some issues and I want to fix them up for the coming year. So we'll go through the previous fights and we'll see what needs to be fixed up. Okay, now the first fight was against Miles's Claptrap, which is a flipper robot, very fast. I used this serrated claw on it. Actually I used the serrated claw for the entire competition because I was a bit lazy and didn't bother changing them out, although I kind of wish I did now. Now, it was a bit hard trying to flip Claptrap over because he's very fast, very hard to grab hold of, and I don't think I ever flipped him once in the entire fight. And I was also having issues with the drive. Now, I have a new base plate on the bottom of this one and has these screws on the corners. And it turns out that when the jaws are set at a different angle, it's resting on the screw mounts rather than on the wheels, so it doesn't actually drive on one side, so only one wheel will be touching the ground. And I would have to try to adjust it so that the jaws lift the nose off the ground, because the jaws are set so that there's 1 millimeter ground clearance on these front claws when the jaws are down, but the screws poke out further than the front claws and just makes driving very hard. So yeah, it was just, I can't get it to drive in a straight line with the current setup, and I wasn't able to grab hold of him very well. So I ended up losing that fight, getting pushed down the pit, and I didn't flip him once. So yeah, not a good fight. Here you can see how much trouble I have trying to drive the robot. So I'm trying to drive forward at the moment, but the robot just turns. This is because the wheels are being lifted off the ground on one side. When the robot's flipped upside down, which will happen in a second because I'm getting attacked a lot, the wheels are touching the ground and the robot drives straight. So it was actually easier to drive upside down than it was right way up. Now, this is where I try to flip him. Now one of the wheels is completely jammed up because of the broken flange on it, so I couldn't actually move at all there. It was spinning around on the spot. And again, upside down drives well, but then again the wheel locks up, so again spin on the spot. And then this is where it gets pushed down the pit and loses the fight. Okay, the second fight was against Flip Ant. That's a good robot to fight, but yet again another flipper. It has lots of holes in it, so it's easy to grab hold of, and I was able to throw him around quite a bit. I was still suffering the same drive problem, although I also noticed that one of the wheels, because the wheels have some damage on them with these sharp edges exposed on the flanges, they're getting caught on the wheel wells. So one of the wheels was jamming up. Also doesn't help that the wheels are slightly floppy and the motors are moving around a bit, so they weren't quite locked in. So yeah, one of the wheels jammed up occasionally. It was an intermittent problem, so I was able to get some control again, and I managed to throw him around a little bit and win that fight. So that was alright. Okay, here's the start of the fight. Straight off the bat here we have a jammed wheel and the robot, so I tried to charge forward and it just turned. So straight off the bat, jammed wheel. This section here I actually get stuck on top of him. Right now I'm not actually doing anything because I know the wheels aren't touching anything, no point in driving. End up getting a bit frustrated, so I turned the weapon on and the weapon actually managed to pull itself off the top of the robot, so that was handy. There's a pretty good flip I did on him, so I managed to grab him from behind and throw him sideways, so that was good fun. And here's another good flip, so I grab him and throw him across the arena. So it does very entertaining flips, and this is where I actually managed to grab hold of him just before the pit opened and then steer him towards the pit. So there's a nice little grabby clamp which helps because he's got these big holes on the top of his robot. So yep, another win. The third fight was against Sir Flip-A-Lot, the hire robot, basically a 3D printed version of Claptrap. Driving very well. Sir Flip-A-Lot was driving very well. This one still not driving straight. I was getting kind of frustrated and thinking this was a crappy robot that day because of how much drive issues I was having. I did manage to hold him in the corner a few times and sort of pin him and tumble him a bit. But I kind of got lucky with that one because he lost a wheel, because he's a very good driver. Yes, whoever was driving Sir Flip-A-Lot that day was a really good driver, but he lost a wheel, and even though he lost a wheel and I was having drive problems, I couldn't get him down the pit, and it ended up going to a judge's decision, which I won purely because he lost a wheel. So yeah, I was kind of lucky to win this one, and if I was able to drive straight, it might have been a bit different. This section of the fight, I was actually able to hold him in the corner using the flipper. I wasn't really trying to drive very much, just trying to keep the flipper vertical, but I managed to keep him in the corner, so that's probably the best section of the whole fight for my robot. This is the bit where he breaks the wheel off, and yep, so that was good. And this section here, you can see I'm trying to beat him, but I just can't get the robot to turn the way I want it to, so I'm trying to grab him from behind, but the robot doesn't drive straight, so I was trying to drive around him, but yeah, no good. The fourth and final fight for the day was against Blacktop. Again, another 3D printed hire robot, basically the same as Claptrap, so I ended up fighting 3 robots that were pretty much identical, which I didn't realise on the day, but now I look back at the videos was kind of frustrating. But yeah, that was I managed to win that fight. Throw him around quite a bit, and I managed to actually lock onto him and hold him down into the pit, which was the second time that happened that day. So not only does this thing flip, but I'm able to actually grab hold of robots, which is kind of good. But I was still having the same drive problem, the wheels being lifted off the ground and the wheel locking up. So that's the main problem to fix, is to move this base plate onto the top so there's no screws on the bottom, and put new wheels on it. Yeah. Now this is me trying to drive straight across the arena towards him, and as you can see it was a squiggly line, and then it flips itself rather than flipping him. Now this is I'm trying to adjust the flipper arm to be vertical, and as you can see I actually have time in between flips most of the time to be able to adjust it. So yeah, back the robot up, adjust the arm, then move back in. So it doesn't really need any sensors to keep it straight up and down. But as you can see, it also not driving straight at all. That was terrible driving just then. And here we go. This is where I grab him and throw him towards the pit. And then he drives down, then he drives back out, then he drives back down again. Okay, so the things that need to be fixed on this thing after going through the fights is getting rid of these screws off the bottom of the robot so that we have proper drive. Here you can see with the claw sideways that the screw's actually resting on the ground, which is causing the drive problems. And then with the claw vertical, there's only like a bee's old fella sort of distance between the screw and the ground. I would like to add a bearing caster under the front so that is lower than these claws. So it was originally designed that it runs on these claws when the flipping arm is sideways. But I think a single point in the middle to run on would be better than 2 points at the side, because things naturally sit on 3 points. If you have 4 and one of the wheels is slightly too high, then it will sit on the 2 claws in one side, one wheel, and then you'll just have to turning. So I want a single caster in the middle to run on, and then without the base plate, we'll put the base plate on the top. So we'll reshape the top panel a bit so we can put the base plate on. Well, it won't be a base plate anymore, it will be a top cover. So we'll put a top cover on the top. And the only other thing that I want to change is that actually before the previous competition I took this robot to school, and it spent 2 lessons with my year 12 students fighting it, because at the end of the year we had nothing to do, all the assignments were handed in, so I gave them my robots to play with. This thing fought for 1 hour non-stop, which was pretty good, but one of the problems was that because it kept falling off the bench, is this pinion gear that drives the weapon kept falling out. So I've actually hot glued this little cover over top of the gear to stop the gear from popping off. So we'll need to probably put a little lip over the front of it, so on the top cover, so when we put the top cover on, it stops the gear from falling off. And so that's it. So the 3 things I want to change is move the base plate to the top, put a caster in the front, cover over this gear, and print some new wheels for it, which isn't really a problem, just, yeah, new wheels.
There's the damage to the wheel that I was referring to. So this little raised lip on it kept getting caught onto these wheel guards.
And we might as well design a new claw for it while we're at it.
Here is the updating of the 3D model. Now, I should say that I didn't actually record very much of this because the first version of this robot was actually designed to be laser cut, and so it has a lot of the right angles and slots and tongue and grooves and that sort of thing built into the model. And I actually spent most of the time trying to delete that and turn it back into a 3D model for 3D printing. And I was actually watching the cricket at the time, so I kind of paused quite a lot of it too, so there's not really much point in watching me update too much of the model. So yeah, it's mostly just a lot of editing of nonsense really. So here is the finished model for version 4 of Slightly Mad Angus. So the main thing I did was taper the top of the robot, try to add more space on the inside and make that into the top cover. I moved the switch over to one side slightly so it's actually attached to the main frame of the robot. Added this little caster bearing just behind the main gear. I'm not entirely sure this is going to work, but we'll give it a go anyway. It's going to be hot glued in there. As you can see, it's the lowest point, so the claws aren't the lowest point. There's a little pinion cover. As you can see, the gear's only a single D flat on it, so it slides forward, so the cover will hold the gear on. And the cover is attached to the top cover of the robot, so that can still be removed. And this is the new claw I designed. So if we open that up, using select part only because the gears are a part of a sub-assembly, and as that opens, come on, hurry up, there we go. So it's just a standard claw. I only modelled half of the claw and then patterned around 3 times. So I don't know if that'll work, but we'll do it for fun. There's the 3D print going. Yay, brand new orange filament because I ran out of red. Here is the little caster bearing with a bamboo skewer for the axle. Here is the finished robot with the brand new 3-tooth jaws, and here's testing it. As you can see, the jaws are able to flip people, particularly from the back of Wee-Mad Alpha, it works pretty well, but I did find that these jaws don't work overall because they tend not to grab. I think it's something to do with the angle of the jaws or something. They do act as a lifter, but they don't seem to grab as well as the two-tooth jaws. So I do like them because they look really cool, but for some reason the way it grabs hold and spins the robot around, it's like it's off axis or something, and they just slide off the jaws, which is probably good too because the jaws are slightly angled a bit to help with drive. So I'm not entirely sure I'll use these in combat or not. I'll just probably use them for pictures. There's the serrated jaws that I used at the last competition. Yep, as you can see here, they do still work quite well, although not every time. They are slightly wide and chunky, so they have a bit of trouble getting under the robot sometimes, particularly between the wheels. But when they do grab, they grab quite easily, so I quite like them. There's the wide jaws. These are good for robots like Claptrap and the ones I was fighting on the weekend, so I probably should have used it. But it's not really good for the other robots I have because they need a wide area to grab hold of. And as you can see, grabbing hold of my other robots is a bit hard sometimes, and they tend to just lift the other robots rather than grabbing them. So yeah, good for wide robots. And finally, these are the long jaws. They're basically my original prototype jaws but extended by 20mm, so I think they have about a 60mm reach on them. As you can see, they flip easier than the other jaws, but because they're so long, I'm just afraid that they're going to snap off easily, particularly when fighting spinners. So I haven't actually used these in combat yet, although, yeah, again, I probably should have tried last weekend, because as you can see, they work really well.